What if I told you there's a planeswalker wandering the multiverse who doesn't have a face? Not because it was taken, not because of some accident or curse, because they erased it themselves, along with every memory of who they used to be. Today, we're talking about Ashiok. Not a he, not a she, just Ashiok. A being so consumed by the study of fear that their own body is dissolving into nightmare smoke. A planeswalker who made a deal with the god of lies. A creature that even Elesh Norn, the mother of machines herself, could not predict or control. Ashiok doesn't want to conquer planes, doesn't want to save them, doesn't want power or recognition or legacy. They just want to perfect fear itself, and they're very, very good at it. If you're ready to dive into this story, hit that like button and subscribe, and maybe sleep with the lights on tonight. Let's talk about the Nightmare Weaver. Before we dive into the video, I want to give a big shout out to 124 Music and Schmack for participating in our very first live stream trivia. We'll be doing it again in 2 weeks on November 14th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mark it down, I hope you'll tune in, and a huge congratulations to 124 Music for winning this past trivia. Let's dive into the lore together. Here's what we know about Ashiok's origin. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what plane they're from. We don't know their birth name, their species, their gender, or even what they looked like before. And that's not because Wizards is keeping it secret for a big reveal someday. It's because Ashiok himself doesn't remember. Look at them, where their face should be, where eyes and a nose and a forehead should exist. There's just void. Black smoke pouring from their mouth ends, 2 massive horns framing empty space, and nothing else, just absence. This isn't how they were born. This is what studying nightmares did to them. Ashiok's magic is nightmare manipulation. They reach into your mind, find your deepest fears, and pull them into physical reality. They sculpt terror like an artist sculpts clay, but that kind of magic has a cost. The more they used it, the more their own body began to erode. Their face dissolved first, then their memories. The nightmare energy they willed so expertly started consuming them from the inside out, replacing flesh and bone with smoke and shadow. And here's the truly disturbing part. They don't seem to mind it. Ashiok has spent so long studying fear, so long perfecting it, that they have become fear itself. They float through the multiverse, leaving trails of dread vapor behind them. They never laugh, they never show emotion beyond cold, clinical fascination. They are a predator, yes, but not in the way you think. They don't hunt for food or survival, they hunt for research, for knowledge, for the perfect understanding of what makes beings across the multiverse break. Ashiok's first major appearance was on Theros, the plane of gods and heroes and myths made manifest through devotion. And Ashiok understood something fundamental about Theros that no one else did. If belief could create gods, then fear could create nightmares. They came to Theros specifically because of its power structure. Devotion shaped reality there. Faith had weight, and Ashiok wanted to see what would happen if you weaponized that. But there was a problem. The gods of Theros were powerful, and they didn't appreciate outsiders messing with their plane. Ashiok needed protection, invisibility. So, they made a deal. Not with Heliod, the sun god who claimed to rule Theros. Not with Ephora, goddess of cities and civilization. They made a deal with Phenax, the god of lies, secrets, and deception. The god who understood that truth was just one option among many. The deal was simple. Ashiok would destroy the polis of Artis, and in exchange, Phenax would make them invisible to the gods. Artis was a city where humans and Leonin lived together. Ashiok went to work immediately, pulling nightmares from both populations and using them to incite paranoia, suspicion, and eventually open war. They turned neighbors into enemies. They made allies see monsters in each other's faces. The city tore itself apart. Phenax upheld his end of the bargain. From that moment on, the gods of Theros couldn't perceive Ashiok. They could feel the effects of their presence, the nightmares, the fear, the chaos, but they could not see the source. Ashiok was free to experiment. And experiment they did. They decided to create a god, not through devotion or worship, but through sheer concentrated belief shaped by nightmare magic. They called it Cacophony, and it was meant to be the god of cities, a being that embodied urban life in all its chaotic, overwhelming intensity. Cacophony lasted exactly long enough for Ithara to notice it existed and obliterate it. But that didn't matter to Ashiok. The experiment had worked. They'd proven that gods could be manufactured, sculpted from collective consciousnesses. The fact that it died immediately was simply just data. With that knowledge secured, Ashiok began working on something far more ambitious. A spell that would blanket all of Theros in never-ending slumber. An entire plane trapped in nightmares, ready to be harvested forever. They almost succeeded. Two people stopped them. Dak Faden, the greatest thief in the multiverse, and Ravos, a Theros native who understood what was at stake. Together, they disrupted Ashiok's spell before it could take hold. Ashiok planeswalked away. No anger, no revenge plot, just gone. Because that's what Ashiok does. They don't hold grudges, they don't get attached to plans. If an experiment fails, they move on. There's always another plane, always another fear to study. Years later, Ashiok returned to Theros, but this time, they went somewhere no living being should be able to reach. The Underworld. Elspeth Tyrrell, one of the multiverse's greatest heroes, had died and ended up in Theros' realm of the dead. She was trying to escape, trying to find a way back to life, and Ashiok found her there. They didn't try to kill her, didn't try to stop her escape, they just studied her, watched her. Elspeth had spent her entire life fighting. She'd faced Phyrexians as a child, watched them slaughter everyone she loved, barely escaped with her life. That trauma defined her, shaped her, consumed her, and Ashiok wanted to see it. They tormented her with nightmares pulled directly from her memories, made her relive the Phyrexian invasion over and over and over again, forced her to watch her loved ones die again and again and again while she stood helpless. But something crazy happened. While digging through Elspeth's mind, Ashiok discovered something they'd never encountered before. A threat so vast, so fundamentally terrifying, that even they were fascinated. Phyrexia itself. Not the old Phyrexia that Elspeth had fled as a child. New Phyrexia. A plane of biomechanical horror where everything was being perfected into a unified consciousness of flesh and metal. Ashiok had found their next research subject. They planeswalked away immediately, leaving Elspeth to her escape, because Ashiok had just learned about the multiverse's greatest nightmare, and they had to see it for themselves. Most planeswalkers avoided New Phyrexia. It was suicide to go there. The Phyrexians were converting everything they touched, spreading their gospel of completion across the multiverse. Anyone who wasn't Phyrexian was either a future convert or an enemy. Ashiok walked right in. They went directly to Elesh Norn, the mother of machines, the white praetor who led New Phyrexia's crusade. She was ruthless, calculating, utterly convinced of her own superiority and the righteousness of Phyrexian perfection. And Ashiok wanted to see if they could make her afraid. They infiltrated one of her laboratories and watched as she conducted experiments on a subject. Then, using their nightmare magic, they made Norn believe the experiment had failed catastrophically. They warped her perception, showed her failure where there was success, made her doubt her own methods. For just a moment, they made the mother of machines question herself. Norn realized immediately what was happening. She recognized the intrusion, identified Ashiok as the source, and attacked with the full force of Phyrexian fury. But Ashiok had already gotten what they came for. As Norn's forces closed in, they conjured one final nightmare. A vision of Elspeth wearing Norn's own armor, standing victorious, and then planeswalked away. It was a taunt, a message, a reminder that even the leader of New Phyrexia, even someone who claimed to represent perfection itself, could be made to feel fear. And that's all Ashiok needed to know. Then came the Phyrexian invasion of the multiverse. Realmbreaker pierced through planes, armies of completed horrors poured through, and planeswalkers fell one by one. The Phyrexians came closer to victory than any threat in Magic's history. And then, they lost. But the cost was catastrophic. When the Phyrexian threat was finally neutralized, something fundamental about the multiverse changed. The Planeswalker Spark, the rare gift that allowed beings to travel between planes, was stripped from almost everyone who had it. Thousands of Planeswalkers lost their sparks in what became known as the Great Pruning. Powerful, legendary figures suddenly found themselves trapped on a single plane, mortal and vulnerable. Ashiok kept their spark. We don't know why, we don't know how, but Ashiok walked away from the multiverse's greatest catastrophe completely unaffected, still able to planeswalk freely while former gods and heroes were stranded. Maybe it's because their connection to nightmare magic runs so deep that it's inseparable from their spark. Maybe it's because they're so far removed from their original identity that the force that stripped other sparks couldn't find anything to latch onto. Or maybe fear itself can't be stripped away. Maybe it's too universal, too embedded in the nature of consciousness to be removed. Whatever the reason, Ashiok continued their research as if nothing had happened. Fast forward to when Ashiok heard about what was happening on Eldraine, they must have thought it was a gift. The entire plane had been hit by the Wicked Slumber, a curse that trapped people in endless sleep. Millions of minds, all dreaming simultaneously, all vulnerable to nightmare manipulation. It was the perfect experiment. Ashiok arrived on Eldraine and immediately began pulling nightmares from sleeping citizens into the waking world. They weren't trying to break the curse or save anyone. They were just harvesting, studying, perfecting their craft. They allied with Iriet, one of the witches who had helped create the sleeping curse in the first place. She understood the magic behind the slumber. Ashiok understood how to weaponize the dreams trapped within it. Together, they turned Eldraine into a nightmare factory. But then, Will Kenrith, one of the Planeswalker twins from Eldraine, launched an assault on Castle Ardenvale to break the curse. Ashiok responded by taking direct control of the sleeping citizens, using them as puppets to defend against the attack. It almost worked, but Kellen, a young hero of Eldraine, managed to restrain Ashiok long enough for Will to land a direct hit, an ice bolt that struck true and forced them to planeswalk to safety. Ashiok retreated, not defeated exactly, just done with that particular experiment. Because that's what Eldraine was to them, an experiment, and they had gathered enough data. Here's where things start to get strange in this story. After Eldraine, someone started using Ashiok's image. Not Ashiok themselves, someone pretending to be them, wearing their appearance like a disguise. That someone was Jace Beleren. Jace needed to recruit a team for a mission on Thunder Junction, but he couldn't do it as himself. Too recognizable, too much history. So he took on Ashiok's form as a cover identity. The first person he recruited while wearing that face? Iriet, the same witch Ashiok had worked with on Eldraine. Jace, pretending to be Ashiok, freed her from prison and brought her onto his team. And here's the question that should terrify you. Does Ashiok know? Are they aware that someone is using their identity? Do they even care? Are they watching from somewhere, studying how others react when they think they're dealing with the Nightmare Weaver? Or is this just another fear to study? The fear of never knowing who you're really talking to? We don't know. Ashiok hasn't shown up to confront Jace, hasn't corrected the impersonation, hasn't done anything, which is somehow more unsettling than if they had. So, what is Ashiok? They're not a villain in the traditional sense. They don't want to rule, don't want to destroy, don't want anything except understanding. They're a researcher, a scientist of fear, someone who has studied terror so deeply, so completely, that they've become indistinguishable from it. Their face is gone. Their memories, gone. Their identity, gone. All that remains is purpose. Find fear, understand fear, perfect fear. And they're very good at their job. They made a god. They tormented a hero in the Underworld. They tested the mother of machines and walked away unscathed. They survived the Great Pruning when so many others lost everything. They turned an entire plane's slumber into a nightmare harvest. And through it all, they never laughed, never showed emotion, never revealed anything about who they are or what they want beyond the next experiment. Ashiok is the purest distillation of horror magic has ever created. Not because they're powerful, though they are, not because they're cruel, though they can be, but because they're unknowable. You can't reason with them, can't predict them, can't understand their motivations or appeal to their humanity because they've erased whatever humanity they possibly once had. They are fear, studying fear, perfecting fear, and they will never stop. Because there's always another plane, always another mind to explore, always another nightmare to manifest. And Ashiok has all the time in the multiverse. If this deep dive into Magic's most enigmatic planeswalker resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more lore deep dives. Share this with anyone who you think would enjoy this story and loves the deeper tales of Magic the Gathering. What's your theory about Ashiok's origin? Do you think they were always this way, or was there a specific moment that broke them? Let me know in the comments down below. And tell me, what other horror-focused planeswalker should I cover next? Thanks for watching, and remember, your nightmares are never just dreams. Sometimes they're research. We'll dive in again soon.